Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Hello and welcome once again to the Trail Daddy podcast, your tour of the week that was for the Portland Trail Blazers. I am Dave Deckard, managing editor of Blazers Edge, and your tour guide for this little trip, and it's going to be a lot more fun than we thought it might be. The Blazers went 2-2 since we have last talked. So, I mean, it's not exactly a trip to Disneyland, but at least it might be Six Flags or something. It's certainly not a trip to the dentist, which is what we feared it might be. The Blazers lost to the New Orleans Pelicans narrowly last Friday night, just after we did our last podcast. But then they beat those same Pelicans on Sunday, lost pretty handily to the Sacramento Kings on Monday, but then edged out the Los Angeles Clippers on Wednesday in a great road win. They now have a 2-3 record along with almost the entire rest of the NBA. Everybody's either 2-3 or 3-2. I think there are like 12 teams in the league that have a better or worse record than that. But the Blazers will take the mushy middle, so to speak. A couple years ago, that might have been disappointing. Certainly, if you're a Milwaukee's Bucks fan, you don't like where your team is right now. But 2-3 for the Blazers is plenty good. Let's talk about that a little bit. How are the Blazers winning? Well, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news, I suppose, is that the energy remains high. Their commitment remains high. They're getting relatively decent contributions out of their bench, which we absolutely love. Because, look, one of the things that was happening in the early games of the season, the first couple anyway, is that the Blazers were coming out hot and cooling down. Their energy would kind of flag. We all remember, I think, Golden State in that home opener, for instance, watching the Blazers run, letting themselves run themselves out, and then running back on them even harder. That hasn't happened too much. It did a little bit in Sacramento, but that's really the only other game that I can think of where the Blazers absolutely got blitzed. Other than that, they've been keeping their attention on the game, keeping their energy high, being able to push tempo a little bit, but also being able to score in the half court. All of that is good. Their defense, I think, has been consistent. That doesn't necessarily mean consistently good, but we are still seeing, and let's start here. We are still seeing a strong commitment to defending the lane. And you absolutely have to love that. First of all, it's keeping the opponent scoring percentage down, or field goal percentage down, which is critical for Portland because, look, their offense is not that good. All right. No matter which way you slice it, their offense is not great. They have to play defense in order to have any kind of chance. Now, last year, they were 25th in the league with a 49.1% field goal percentage given up. That is not good when you are giving up 50%. This year, they are 15th, right in the middle of the pack, 44.7%, which is an enormous difference. Now, again, you have to talk about small sample size. You have to be careful about what conclusions you draw. But look, 44.7 under 45%, a heck of a lot better than approaching 50%. It's a big, big deal. Also, check this out. Last year, the Trailblazers were, 24th in the league in points in the paint given up, 53.5. That is a lot. This year, they are, check this out, tied for 6th in the league, 42.4. Over 9 points per game shaved off of their paint scoring for the opponent. That is relatively good defense compared to where they were. It is absolutely fantastic compared to possible expectations. Okay. Also, they are managing not to be too bad in fouling and free throws given up. They're 18th in the league at 25.6. Now, this is the other possible hitch about defending the paint, is you've got a combination of more players in there, and the Blazers are very young, and young players tend to get a lot of fouls called against them. So the real danger is you start giving up like 30 free throws a game, and some teams are. Indiana, Toronto, Philadelphia, Brooklyn. It is scary. I don't know if you've seen the Nets, but they are giving up over 37 free throws per game. I mean, that's almost 10 per quarter. The Blazers, 25.6, 18th. Again, not great. Look, for perspective, Utah and New York are giving up 18.4 and 19. So the Blazers don't look that great at 25.6, but it's good enough, especially for the increased emphasis on paint defense. They're doing almost everything right defensively, or as right as they can get. Do we have any quibbles? Perhaps. 37.2% given up at the 3-point arc. That's 21st in the league. Not terrible, but they were better last year. But again, I think you've got to look at points of emphasis, right? It's like, okay, we know that we're going to defend the paint better. Therefore, we are going to give up a little bit getting back to the arc. The one that hurts, I think, is they are 25th in the league at fast break points given up with 18.6. Okay. That is, that's a lot, but again, it's a sacrifice that they're making when they up-tempo the game. So for perspective, the Lakers are giving up 21.2. That's the worst in the league. So the Blazers are about 2.5 points off of that. The Golden State Warriors are only giving up 6.2 and the Houston Rockets 6.4. The Blazers are 12 points off of that. That's a big number. If the Blazers could get to the middle of the pack, if they could get about where Philadelphia, Memphis, Cleveland are, 14, 15 points a game given up on the break, they will be doing really well. They could actually start to win games then. Here's part of the problem with this, okay? Portland's guards are penetrating a lot. Anthony Simons will shoot threes, but that's not going to be his bread and butter off the dribble. He's going to want to drive or set up action. Triply so for Scoot Henderson. Scoot is doing nothing but driving almost. If he's shooting a three, it's a catch and shoot, right? So both of those guys are down deep in the lane. Portland has good and fast wings, but those wings are on the sides of the court to catch 3-point shots and make the opponent pay for packing the lane. So here's what you end up with on a given Portland offensive possession. You end up with at least one guard, usually down near the restricted area. Center down there in order to get an offensive rebound, and he's cleared out his man out of the guard's exterior lanes, so he wants to pull his man deep down if he can't pull him off to the side. You have two Blazers wings off in the corners of the court, which means you have minimum 4 Blazers down there in a line roughly equal with the restricted area or the basket. That also means, by definition, you have several defenders who are either equal to or higher than that position, which means that all the defense has to do is grab one rebound, grab the board. And by the way, opposing players can do this. They can rebound in traffic. You grab the board, you pivot and turn, you outlet the ball, and all of a sudden you have a 2-on-1 break, in essence. If even one of your guys releases, along with the exterior guard. You have a 2-on-1 break, 2 opponents, 1 Blazers guard headed down the floor. Now, Portland's wings, I think, and the guard that penetrates, they're trying to get back. It's not for lack of effort, but there's just too much physical space between them and the other rim to stop that break. So, I don't know what the Blazers are going to do about that. I don't think they can change Scoot's offense. Simons, you want him to be in the mid-range and going inside because it creates more and easier opportunities for him and his teammates. But something has to happen. I don't know if you can take a wing and put him on the diagonal. I don't know if you give up the offensive rebound. And this is the other thing. This is the hard choice, is that Portland needs every point that they can get. And part of what they're doing is they're offensive rebounding really pretty well. So if you make a point of emphasis to get back on defense and you give up the offensive rebounds, then you're going to cost yourself points that you score. If you don't do it, you may be costing yourself points that the opponent scores. This is kind of the catch-22. I don't know if or how they're going to work that out, but if there's a problem with the defense right now, that's pretty much it. Now, here's another issue amid the happiness. The Blazers are either winning barely right now or losing by a lot. There's not too much in between. You can usually tell when Portland's in a game or out of a game, which means when they're in a game, if they're going to be in the game, like we just said, literally every point is critical. They have to be hitting on all cylinders. And the one cylinder that they've been hitting on consistently in the 2 games they've won, in both games, they shot over 40% from the 3-point arc. When they've shot under 40% from the 3-point arc, they have not won. Here's the problem with that. They're not really a good 3-point shooting team. Sometimes they get hot. I mean, Jeremy Grant is good pretty much all the time. I mean, he's had a game, but you can bank on Jeremy. And especially, by the way, like we talked about before on the site, they've been using Jeremy more as a weak side 3-point shooter. And what that means is he's not on the side always that the ball starts on. Last year, he was one of their 2 main scorers, and he was usually on the same side as the ball when the play started, which meant it was a short and easy pass to get to him, and he could then make his moves and score the ball, okay? That produced plenty of points for him, but it also meant that Portland's weak side was full of weak offensive players because your ball initiator, which was often Anthony Simons, their top scorer, and your best secondary scorer, Jeremy Grant, were both right over there on one side of the court, meaning that the opponent could then load their defense to that side and not worry too much about whether some nameless small forward or power forward was going to burn them from the other side. This year, Chauncey Billups has put Jeremy a little bit more on the weak side, meaning he starts on that diagonal often on the opposite side of the floor. So now you've got Anthony Simons over there, either looking to shoot or penetrate. If the team opposing the Blazers doesn't have a real good guard to stop him one-on-one, which, by the way, here's the value in Simons. That means stopping a 3-pointer or stopping a pull-up or stopping a layup, because he can do all of them. He doesn't usually get all the way to the cup, but he's been doing it more this year than he has in years past. So you have to have a really good all-court defender to stop Simons, or you have to send help. And when the opposing team sends help, now because of where the Blazers have Jeremy Grant, they're sending help away from Grant instead of towards him. And some of these games where he's shooting lights out or getting a lot of nice, quick, easy shots, that's exactly why it's happening. Props to Jeremy Grant for assuming that weak side offense. Props to the coaching staff for drawing up the scheme. It's really working. It's one of the nice parts about their offense. However, that said, if Grant isn't over there draining lots of threes, The Blazers don't have a lot of players who will. Every once in a while, Scoot gets hot, but you already know that's not really a bankable shot. Toumani Camara has looked great with his three-point shot, and in fact, he's often another weak side guy who can catch it and shoot it from the corner. His shot actually looks beautiful right now, but he's not a volume shooter. And who knows whether he will be able to absorb much of the offense. You've got other guys. I mean, DeAndre Ayton has done that corner three. He did it a couple times versus the Clippers. That's not, look, he's adopting it, but I don't think opponents are scared of DeAndre Ayton shooting three-pointers yet, any more than they would have been scared of Yusuf Nurkic doing it all the years that he tried. I mean, you've got, Jabari Walker coming off the bench. That's probably a no. Denny. Gosh. Now, I pause because I'm just so, I'm a little bit bewildered with him. Let's put him off. But Denny Avdia is streaky so far. And when he's on, that's a super powerful weapon. And I love his contribution to Portland's offense. But when the switch goes off, he tends to go off all the way. That said, that's not a good solution for that three-point shooting outlet. I mean, you need to be on and be consistent. So, basically right now, it looks like the solution for the Blazers is get real hot from three, and then you're going to have a chance to win. That's not going to happen most nights, which means still most nights it doesn't look like they're going to have a chance to win. They need to develop more offense while keeping their defense solid before we get really confident in them. Now, let's talk about Camara a little bit more. Let's get to the forwards. Toumani Camara has been all over the place on defense in a very good way. I think he had a fantastic week. And as I said, his three-point shot, he's done a little bit of dribble driving, but the most important thing he's done, he's played the passing lanes, and he's gotten in front of some very good offensive players. And he's gone down on point guards. He's gone up to power forwards. He's gone everywhere in between. In fact, sometimes it seems like Toumani is just going to take whomever has the ball on a given possession, at least until the Blazers set up. And I love that kind of confidence, and I love that kind of self-starting, so to speak. Toumani appears to know why he's on the floor, and he is executing at a very high defensive level. So bravo to him. That was a fantastic week. Denny Avdia. This has not been his best week. I think he's made some defensive plays. I think, though, after that first game, he's looked a little more muted on defense, and his offense has more or less disappeared. Now, we said, even though he scored well against Golden State in the season opener, that he was not a one-on-one ball-in-hand scorer. He's an opportunistic scorer. He can catch and shoot. He can cut, right? He can make a move to open space as long as it's a simple move and rise. But if he has to take more than 3 dribbles, he's getting stuck. He's also a fantastic facilitator. But I think the Blazers have gone away from that a little bit in favor of their guards. In fact, it felt like a little bit after that Golden State game, look, it's more important to get Scoot and Anthony Simons jump-started than it is to have Denny firing on all cylinders. So let's take the offense through the guards in a little more traditional manner. Let's not go through Denny quite so much. And let's not let him take the ball down the floor and set up. Well, what's happened then is Denny's offensive possessions have become less frequent. He seems to have fewer options because they come after the second or third pass instead of right at the beginning. And particularly when he's tried to score, it's been individually and it's been through traffic, and it's not been terribly successful. It's not surprising. However, it is a little frustrating to have a guy who has that much ability now shooting after 5 games 30% from the floor and 11% from the three-point arc. That is not fantastic, and that's going to hurt. Eventually, that will take him out of the starting lineup, no matter how good his defense is, if it doesn't get better. And again, this may be another one of those insoluble issues for the Trailblazers. Is bumping up Denny's offense going to cost someone else? And that, if it's true, is going to mean that he is probably going to be the second person in that equation, not the first. Scoot Henderson, I think, absolutely polar opposite. He's had a really good week. His shooting percentage from the floor is now up to 44%, and he's approaching 30% from the three-point arc, which is not good, but it's a heck of a lot better than the 21% he was shooting last week. Okay? So, Scoot, I think, has been a direct beneficiary of getting the ball on multiple possessions. His assist rate is pretty good. I think he's making smart plays. His turnover rate has not gone down, but those turnovers don't appear to be the kind that make you facepalm as much. They're honestly made trying to commit to a good play rather than tossing the ball or moving his feet into a bad one. There's reason to hope that that will moderate his total number of turnovers eventually. Hasn't happened yet. What has gone up is his free throw attempts, which really helps in the scoring department. He was at 3.3 last year. He's at 5.0 this year. It's a difference of 4.2 per 36 and 6.5 per 36, which, look, that's not double, but that's actually a pretty good jump. That combined with his increased field goal percentage, and last year, 38.5% for the season, this year so far, 44.1%, and his three-point percentage moving up, that is good stuff. Now, Scoot's ability to get to the hole is something that he is increasingly confident in, to the point where I think we can say, if opponents send one defender against Scoot, he's going to get by that defender. And he's going to engage their second level of defense, which is usually the center. That's allowing him some of these lob attempts to DeAndre Ayton and occasionally Donovan Clingan. That's an exciting part of his passing game that's unfolding. I expect that to continue. However, the real money comes when Scoot is able to convert even more consistently on his layup attempts in traffic. You will notice that even though his percentage is going up, that his attempts are still rimming off an awful lot. The fouls are bailing him out. They're not and ones. And his attempts don't look entirely comfortable after the release. The ball is spraying weird places. If that shot, that close-in layup in traffic, ever starts to fall with consistency, the way, for instance, Anthony Simons's usually do, although he takes far fewer. But if Scoot develops that level of proficiency, the world is going to open up for him. Because here's what's going to happen. Opponents are going to have to send another defender to stop his penetration before he gets to the rim. And at that point, the passing game is going to open up for him, and he is going to have a chance to unveil a whole new part of his game. There is where the money is. There is where superstar Scoot lies, if and when that happens. But it will not happen unless he can convert those layups. Now, in the Clippers game, he did convert some catch-and-shoot threes, made the Clippers pay for leaving him alone. That's another wrinkle I think that is important. But realistically, that 3-point shot, and especially the one he needs, is off the dribble, and that's a long ways from being good. I don't think that he necessarily develops that anytime soon. I think if he ever becomes competent ever in the league, that will be enough. I mean, competent instead of, frankly, bad. But that layup conversion is enough right now to send him to the next level, and that's the development to look for. I think Scoot's been doing well enough on defense. Anthony Simons, hit and miss. Now, I think we saw some defensive sparks from Anthony Simons this week, and that was good. It was certainly better than his opening game, and I think the first two were not that great for him. But I think probably when Brandon Ingram hit that shot on him to win the first New Orleans game, it felt like something clicked in Simons. And I think he came out a little bit harder defensively the next game. And I think he's kept up the effort. But I think it's also safe to say that he doesn't have the potential to be a defensive stopper. That's not going to be his game. Offense is his calling card. Here's the problem. Even though he's averaging 20.6 per game, it's on 38.8% field goal shooting, 31% from the 3-point arc. That's not even close. I mean, first of all, it's 50 points below where he was last year with his percentages, which in itself was lower than his, well, that was right about his career average of 43%. His 3-point percentage, 31.0. He's always been around, at least for the last few years. I mean, 38.5 is his average. He topped 40 a couple years. I don't know if you remember in 21-22, he shot 40.5% from the 3-point arc with 7.8, almost 8 attempts per game. 40% shooting from 3 on 8 attempts per game is huge. Okay. Also, the next year, the year he first topped 20 points per game, he only shot 37.7 or 38% from the 3-point arc, but he attempted 9.1 shots per game. So that all came to the good, right? In fact, he attempted more 3s than 2s that year. This year, it's about even. He's kept up the rate of 3-point attempts at 8.4, which is not too far from his 9.1, which was a career high. But shooting 31% is a career low and really low for an NBA player who shoots 3s. That's got to be fixed. If nothing else, if he can fix the 3-point shot, that's going to be a big step toward making the world right with Anthony. But honestly, with the way the Blazers need him and need offense, he needs to be shooting about 45% from the field, back up to 38% minimum from the arc, and probably scoring 23 or 24 points per game, not 20.6. It's not been a good start for Simons. I don't know quite what to do about that. I mean, opposing defenses are paying more attention to him than anybody, even than to Jeremy Grant. They're going to leave Jeremy single covered unless he literally gets in the lane and they have another defender handy. They pick up Simons out on the court as soon as he makes his dribble, and they don't let him shoot free from the 3-point arc. They know who the main scorer is for the Blazers. He's got to find a way to break that, or his teammates have to find a way to help him. If that doesn't happen, then it's possible he doesn't get back to usable percentages. But if that's true, I mean, that's partially his skill, and we may say that he's not a true superstar number 1 option. But also, it's because there's just not enough guys around him to draw attention to make the opponent pay for sending those double teams. Anyway, Anthony is a guy to watch. And hope that this gets better. There have been some minor bench guys. I mean, Chris Murray's gotten some playing time. Rayon Rupert's gotten some playing time. Even Danilo Banton a little bit. But none of them. Oh, and Jabari Walker, we mentioned. I think Jabari's had a good game or two. I'm not sure that anybody else has registered enough for us to pay too much attention to. We need a lot of reps on that deep bench. I think we can say that for the most part, yeah, and not entirely. I want to say for the most part, the deep bench hasn't hurt the Blazers. I think that's not been true. I think there were moments in the Sacramento game that the Blazers got housed a little bit when they didn't have enough manpower. I think we saw moments in the Clippers game where it threatened to slip. So the jury's still out on those guys. And I want to see more from them before I make many pronouncements about them individually or together. But the guys we've left out and the guys we'll close on is the centers. And I think actually they've done a pretty fantastic job this week. Let's start with Donovan Clingan off the bench. He's been getting a modest amount of playing time. The thing about Clingan is you notice him because he changes the game, right? It's radically different when he comes in because of his body size, because of his defense, because of where he moves on the floor. He's like a spotlight. You can see him. I'm not saying that he's a star. I'm just saying he plays different than anybody on this team. Makes it seem like he's out there a lot. He's actually playing between 11 and 15 minutes per game, which is not too much. But those 11, 15 minutes are full of rebounds, usually or often blocks, sometimes personal fouls too. This is starting to become a little bit of an issue sometimes, but that is part of the learning curve. You still see him get a little more than vertical, especially with his arms, trying to make blocks. The way I envision it is he's trying to be an umbrella, because I think that's what he could be in college, that his height and long arms were enough where if he overshadowed an offensive player, he could block anywhere in that area and call it good. In fact, it was often enough just to turn the player away. The umbrella of Clingan's arms and hands over your head was enough to deter you or make you change the shot. That's not the way it works in the NBA, where everybody can jump. Guys are a lot taller, quicker, stronger, all that stuff. Okay. Your block shot has to come not as an umbrella, but as a certain point where the ball literally is in that moment, either right in the guy's hand or just out of the guy's hand. That is a small piece of real estate where you can actually get that block, even if you are taller and bigger than the guy who is shooting. And Clingan sometimes still covers way too much area with his arms and hands and ends up getting his hands caught in the cookie jar, so to speak, hitting someone's arm, hitting someone's head, whatever, leaning over, rather than being able to anticipate and block at the precise point at which the offensive player is releasing the ball. That's rookie-itis. I think he will probably learn that. Now, he's not a super quick guy. He's not a super athlete. So I don't know that he will ever become Dikembe Mutombo or Theo Ratliff in this way, right? But I think that with his size and defensive instincts, if he learns to get a little more judicious and a little more precise, I think the foul issues will go away. Love the rebounding for the most part. I think he's going to be plenty good there. He's already good. He's going to get better. Love those block shots, and just I love the way he eats space, frankly. When you don't have it and then you get it back, you realize how valuable it is to have a guy who can occupy turf in the lane, that you can't just kind of go around or ignore or glide by, but you have to at least factor somewhere in there that this guy exists. And that's a deterrent that causes the opponent to take an extra beat or two, think a little bit more how to get their shot off in the lane. What that causes is, one, they're going under the bucket or past him and shooting back, which NBA players can do, but it's a harder shot. It also allows more defenders to get in there, if not to stop the shot, then at least to get the rebound. And I think that is a critical thing. The Blazers are rebounding really well, and I think in part that's because the shots are not coming as easily and quickly for opponents as they did last year, particularly inside. When opponents were scoring inside the lane with impunity, first of all, they were hitting all their shots, which means there is no rebound. But second of all, they were getting up those shots so naturally and quickly that you had only the natural defender in there to rebound, which was often the center, which meant that the center is trying to stop the shot, and then the center is trying to turn around and rebound the shot, which means that opponents have a chance to get other rebounders in there while the center is making that transition, and you don't get the rebound as easily. taking an extra beat, making the opponent take an extra beat to get the shot up, allows Portland's defense and rebounders to focus and to get inside so that the center is not now the only person rebounding, even though Klingon gets a lot of rebounds. You will often notice Jeremy Grant or Scoot Henderson or whoever it is in there with him. And there are a lot more rebounds in traffic this year for the Blazers, defensive rebounds, I mean, than there were last year. And that's part of why their rebounding is better. And I think part of that, again, he's not playing a lot of minutes, but I do believe that part of that really is Donovan Klingon's influence. And I think the other place where he has had influence is, frankly, on DeAndre Ayton, who, honestly, looks better on defense the last few games than I've seen him in a long time. And particularly, I think in that Clippers game, he had a couple really nice plays. And that's not something you always have seen from Ayton. And I think he's committing to spots. He's committing to getting down low and defending, which was always a little bit of a thing for him. He was more of an out on the floor defender. I think he's showing more at the rim now. And overall, I think he's just stepped up his game a little bit. There seems to be more enthusiasm and inspiration. And I wonder, I don't think he's at all afraid of his minutes because Klingon's behind him. But I wonder if that sense of, well, we have a real center core here now, and I'm not the only guy out here on an island. And by the way, I have some forwards who help me and delay penetration a little bit so I can set up. And by the way, Scoot Henderson isn't horrible and he's trying real hard. If that combination of stuff hasn't made it easier for DeAndre to defend, because I've honestly liked what I've seen from him in the last week more than I've liked him since I've seen him in a Portland uniform. And that's encouraging. Now, his rebounding, of course, is plenty good. You've always liked that aspect of his game. I think his scoring is still a work in progress. Ayton is one of those guys who can do so many things that you wonder what he's going to do. This is terrible. A wrestling analogy comes to mind, and I know people raise their eyebrows when I bring up wrestling, but it kind of fits. Like, a lot of people think that a good wrestler is one who can do 100 moves, like Dean Malenko back in the day. And there is something to be said for that. I mean, Dean Malenko was a fine wrestler. For those who don't know him, he was a little bit short, a little bit muscular and stocky, but he was called the man of 1,000 moves. He knew how to do absolutely anything in the ring. But knowing how to do anything in the ring kind of meant that his matches didn't really always have a story or a flow. Like, he could do 1,000 things, but you couldn't track them. It wasn't necessarily predictable. Where if you look at a guy like Stone Cold Steve Austin, or even more like Hulk Hogan way back in the day. Hulk Hogan did like 4 things. John Cena does 5 things. Steve Austin might have done a half dozen. That's it. I'm not saying they couldn't do more, and Austin often did do more, but if you look at the foundation of their attack, of their matches, they were the same 6 things that really, really worked. NBA players, the really good ones, are often more like Steve Austin than Dean Malenko. They can do things, but they don't always have to do 1,000 things. Instead, they do the same half dozen things or fewer unstoppably. Think about the Dream Shake. Think about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's Skyhook. They were predictable, they were repeatable, and they were absolutely unrepressible. DeAndre Ayton doesn't have that thing. He does 8 or 9 things well. He can shoot a corner 3. He can shoot a little hook in the lane. He can come out on the pick, and he can pick and pop a little bit and shoot from outside. He can pick and roll and get the lob. None of them are really decisive. None of them are absolutely the irresistible force. And I think that trips him up sometimes. Every shot that Ayton takes, I'm wondering if it's going to go in instead of being certain if it's going to go in, except for when he's trailing the break and gets a dunk. Those are fantastic, but those are rare. I kind of want, I don't know. I don't want Ayton to limit what he's doing, but I want to know what DeAndre Ayton's spots are. I want to know where he is money. I want to know what I'm going to see from him nearly every time he gets wherever he gets. Now, to be frank, his 50.7 field goal percentage this season is really good. If you're shooting over 50% in the NBA, kudos to you. You're doing great. The asterisk there is his career average is 59%. And last year, even with a busted team where he was even more random than this year, he was shooting 57%. So I think among the other things that the Blazers do, one of the things back, maybe not the first thing on the list, but somewhere in there, is find DeAndre perhaps some plays. And granted, I'm not sure that they run plays for anybody right now. It's kind of scoop penetration and let's see what happens. Or Anthony Simons with the ball, let's see what happens. And everybody else has to play off the ball and figure it out. But I kind of almost want DeAndre Ayton to be part of that because I think that there's a few points left above his 14.4 current average that the Blazers are leaving on the table. Now, he's averaging a career high so far, 12.2 overall rebounds, 3.2 offensive rebounds, fantastic, big contribution to the offense. He's getting almost no free throw attempts, which tells me he's not necessarily inside or cutting and penetrating as much as he might be. That might be one solution. But even if you just pick and pop him to an open spot or run a back screen for him and let him cut or something, I don't know. But get him, I think, some close-in shots, get him some repetitions, and let's see what happens. His total number of field goal attempts per game is about the same as it was last year and about the same as it has been ever since he developed. But honestly, the quality of those shots, I'm not sure it's there. All right. Well, the Blazers have wins over the Clippers and wins over the Pelicans under their belts. Let's see what happens this week. We have the Oklahoma City Thunder tonight as we speak. You will hear this after that game. I'm expecting that will be a loss. But now we get to head on the road for some collar-tugging games. You have back-to-back on the road at the Phoenix Suns Saturday night. Then you get to New Orleans to play them for the third time in a week, basically. And also that you beat them the last time, so they're going to be loaded for bear. That'll be interesting. I think the fun one will be Thursday the 7th, San Antonio Spurs. They are not doing too well, but Victor Wembanyama is always an interesting opponent, of course, and getting to see him will be interesting. It'll be a battle of the bottom feeders, but who's going to come out ahead? And then you got the Minnesota Timberwolves next Friday. We will talk before then. But suffice it to say, you've got 4 really losable games on the schedule and 1 against the Spurs on the road. That's absolutely no guarantee. So it may be a tough week for the Blazers. This may be as happy as we get for a while. By the way, after that, Memphis Grizzlies, not great. Minnesota Timberwolves, twice in a row. Ouch. So it's not going to be an easy couple weeks for the Blazers. If they come away with 2 wins in the next couple weeks, we might actually have to praise them. But, you know, it wouldn't be terribly surprising to see them come away with a lot of losses. Remember, though, it's a long season. And remember, though, the focus of the season is less the win-loss record than development. And so far, in the second week of the season, they've developed a style, a tempo, and several of their players that are looking upward. If they can patch up a couple of them, looking at you, DeAndre offense, looking at you, Anthony Simons, underline the offense, Denny Avdia, looking at you kind of to rebound for everything, all the areas of the game. If those happen, even 2 of those happen, the Blazers might be in better shape than you think, despite what the next couple weeks are likely to be like. Let's see if it continues on. Let's see what we're talking about next week. Until then, thank you for being with us. And we hope that all your Blazer games are enjoyable, even if it's not a victory. We can always learn something from it. And we'll see you on Blazers Edge and right here next week.
Are you a podcaster? Let's talk podcast hosting. Are you tired of your current podcast host? Need real support in a community that gets it? At Rogue Media Network, we offer top-tier podcast hosting services to help you thrive. From hosting and distribution to dedicated support, we've got you covered. Starting as low as $25 a month. Join our community of passionate podcasters today. Contact us at hello@roguemedianetwork.com.